The new crystal tech has been revealed, a couple days past, and I've been waiting for more information to come our way. And what I've found so far that has been quite a good and positive change that I've been advocating as well in one of my KVK feedback videos is the biggest Kalkurak level is going to be during relevant times, and that is before Kingsland. So that on in itself is a very positive change, regardless of the actual crystal tech, because that Kalkurak is now 6 billion crystals. So it's quite a lot, especially for free to play as myself. And that is a good start to this new crystal tech era. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the KVK timer, but what I do have is a very nice graph right here from the King's Codex. So special thanks to King's Codex and the creator of this nicely made document. And what I want to talk about first is actually something that is not related to technology, rather than it's the all damage decrease from 40% to 30%. So that is going to slow down the combat, which if you're playing the current meta, which is all about, back and forth, you're relying on insta-proc damage, you're racing who gets the first raid cycle, and then if you get out of position for just a second, you're just deleted, regardless of your spending level. And that can be very frustrating for everyone, not just free to play, but especially for the free to play, because it's just not fun. And I know there are some people who actually like that because they know how to just really position their marches, or they're not using too many marches. And in that case, you just have a better positioning overall, using less marches compared to someone who uses like 5, 6, or 7, because the marches are flaring out when you're targeting. So you have to always make sure that you're always sticking them together as close as possible. So now, I still believe like if you get out of position, you're still gonna get deleted. It's just gonna take a bit longer. So that's something. I don't know how much longer. It also depends on how far you go into the tree. But that is also a welcome change because it's just not fun. We have a lot of power creep right now with the commanders who are doing just tons of damage, and you have this new formation, which is the pincer formation. And honestly, what I've seen so far is just feels like an arch prime formation, which is funny because pincer is just doing everything better than arch, not just field but for rally and garrison, which is something that I honestly did not expect, because arch is also increasing your counterattack and things like that. But the pincer formation is too strong that he doesn't even care about that. So you have all these commanders, you have all these formations coming into the game, and I think reducing the overall damage you get in the KVK is the right act to kind of balance it out. It's a start. And what's also worth noting is we're not getting all damage really for the field in this new tech era. We're only getting it for against rallies and garrisons. So I think that's a fair compensation, because not a lot of players will actually swarm garrisons and rallies. Only the people who have decent tech should be able to do that. So kind of limits the player, but also it's designed really because not everyone should be able to swarm a structure or rally, because you probably do not have the most optimized pairing for that, as comparing to something like a very good open field march like Luce with Alex. It's great for the field, but if you want to swarm a flag with it, not the best idea. It's simply not the best march you can do, for example. So we have no all damage for field, which in turn makes any all damage on the armaments more valuable and more desirable. And now, depending on the troop type, so for infantry, for example, it depends on your pairing. But now it's much more approachable to choose all damage over health. But also it depends on your pairing. For example, if you're pairing Bai Chi, who has some health, 20%, or actually 10%, and if you pair it by William Wallace, he has another 10%, so it's like 20% health. It's not the highest, but I think this March could be used. For example, if you want to use all damage armament on, I think that's a fair trade. Same with Ragnar and Scipio. Scipio has the 30% health, actually 20% health, but Ragnar has 10% defense and the skill damage reduction, so it's quite a tanky March. And you could also opt out for either more tankiness, actually 40% defense, my bad. So even more tankiness. So I think this is a March that you could also opt out for more all damage if you're running still wedge infantry. And the troop that benefits the most from all damage right now, because the new tech changes don't really affect it too much, is Cavalry. So Cavalry has the most health coming from equipment, so you can really opt out to just add more all damage to your Cavalry, because you're not going to be losing out on any sort of trade related reports. Instead, you're going to be doing more damage, which is more desirable in this new tech era. And for archers, I would say it depends on the pairing, because for example, if you're using Zoo with Philip, there's gonna be like 60%, 65% health. So I think this could be another candidate for possible all damage setup. Just depends on the next archer, really. So you can always see what works for you. But I would say you can't go wrong with either choices, all damage or health on archers. So all damage mostly benefiting cavalry, then infantry, then archers. And then for siege, I don't know about siege. Siege probably could use more all damage because we're doing less damage overall. So the fighting is going to be more prolonged, but the march is going to be bigger. And my experience with siege is you kind of want the lower health marchers. You want to hit them because you're going to be receiving less counterattack damage from your hits. So I'm not sure how good the new siege will be, but I could say for sure that their damage will be reduced unless you really micro your own targets, choosing to hit the yellow targets, not the full health ones. Because remember, if we get our desired troop capacity as a free-to-play low spender all the way up to 50% total, you're going to be using close to 400 or 400k marches on the field. So it's going to be quite chunky. As well as you're going to be having yourself that march as well. But this depends on the quality of your opponent. How fast do they melt? How fast do they, regroup? Things like that. So there's a lot of nuances. But also, I think there might be a new meta change a bit, because we're relying on a lot of racing to get, skill activations first. You're relying on insta-proc damage and just AoE. I don't think that won't change too much, but you'll be able to have lasting fights. So things and talents, something like effortless, are going to be much better, because in an ideal situation, you will be in combat for longer. So any type of ramping talents, which in the current meta are mostly being used for rallying, really, because you're going to be able to have the sustaining damage, might be more valuable in the field. So something to look out for. And if you look at the march speed side of things, with the troop specific march speed, any march speed you might have on armaments right now are not going to be as desirable, I think, because you can just get them from the tech, and you can use your armaments to roll them for extra stats, especially if you're like able to get all damage or health instead. So there's some tweaks you can do, but overall, I don't think this changes too drastically in terms of equipment and armaments, but it gives you a guideline on what to look out for. Also, speaking of commanders, I think winners like Philip actually might get even more relevant because his active skill is actually the damage reduction we've been talking about. And it it's applying your own troops. So you're basically having damage reduction of 10% for all troops simply by having Philip maxed or Philip on the field. So that's quite strong. And it's going to be quite strong for Philip users who are using him at the start of a zone or at the start of KVK, or compared to the later stages where some or most players will have access to the damage reduction technology. I don't know how fast we can reach it because we don't know the prerequisites, and that is ultimately one of my questions, because I need the prerequisites to know what is the most optimal route to take in order to max things like color arms, because color arms is now at the start of the tree, and I'm pretty confident we can max out the first color arms without any troubles, because at max level it is only 15% troop capacity, and I only say 15 because the second one is giving you 35%, so it's quite a bigger number. It totals at 50%, and I'm just going to see how viable is it to reach it during relevant times. So the fact that it is quite close of the opening gives me some confidence, but we don't know the prerequisites yet, or at least I don't know. I haven't seen any yet, but we have to find out. Ideally, I would like to find out myself. So I just need to queue up for the KVK and then see it from my own firsthand, and then I can make some routes that you can take to make your most optimized performance. Because in my current Crystal Tech guide, I really prioritize getting more troops on the field and more march speed. So now march speed is going to be dissected into specific troop types. So this could be quite a good change, because maybe you're not running all your marches. Maybe you're not running all troop types. Maybe you're just running mostly infantry, mostly cavalry, or just one archer march. Maybe, you could have some customizations depending on your playstyle and depending on the choices you made along the way. But I'd say from my current perspective, what I can do is, if there are no restrictions, let's say, if we go to the defense and health, I'll prioritize health on infantry. I will prioritize march speed on my archers. Even though I have D5 boots, which are crit, I would still prefer to have them more march speed compared to other troop types. And from the defense standpoint, I would work on cavalry defense, because, like I said before, cavalry has a lot of health, and getting more defense is more beneficial for them in order to have that balance ratio of the troop attributes. And the bonus are depending on how far we go, but I don't expect to be reaching damage reduction as a free-to-play. It might be possible, but I think, if I'm being really honest, I think damage reduction is going to be used for garrisons. I think this makes the most logical application, because this feels logical, especially if you're running Tokugawa, which is already having a lot of shields, a lot of tankiness. I think it's going to be quite strong. And don't forget, we also have the all damage, which applies to rallies and garrisons. So it's not going to be just, garrison meta all the time. You're still going to be able to do more damage to garrisons, but not as much as compared to the field. And now, in an ideal situation where you, as a free-to-play low spender, who have maximum troop capacity, and you're running, and you might not even be running anymore, because a lot of troops there, like 400k troops, you might not have enough troops to run your desired number of marches, like 5 marches. You might have to reduce that to 3 or 4. And if you do not have the hospital capacity, I will probably advise it to slim down to a couple marches, because You have to see it for yourself, but you won't be as punished before. But if you're running multiple marches with 400k troops, you're running like 2 million troops on the field. And we do have more hospital capacity, which is 30%, if I'm not mistaken. 30% that then we have from the stage, from the past glory. I think it's another 30%. And then from some structures, like 5 to 10%. So looking at a bigger hospital size, which is substantially needed if you're running more troops on the field. And it's going to be necessary if you're running all arms, you have to increase your hospital capacity. So it's going to be a little bit weird because you might be able to just get routed instantly. But even if you get routed instantly, now you have the technology, which it just seems like a whale tech in my opinion, because it costs gems to auto retreat. I think it's like 200 gems per troop. So if you're running 5 troops, insta route the 1000 gems, I don't think it's necessarily worth it. There's only been so few situations where you want to use that. There's maybe like a fort drop or Kingsland if you want to have bigger numbers faster. So not very applicable for the average player. I'm not really interested in that. Then we have the Runecraft. Runecraft, I believe, is also 3 million crystals. So I don't know how viable is it going to be for our average fielder. I think for a garrison, if you want like a 10% health rune or a 7 rune at the tip of your finger to get better trades, because you're just using all your kingdom's troops, I think that's definitely worthwhile. But for the average fielder, I think you probably have rune available from the structures in the KVK. You just have to refresh it probably more frequently. So I would take that over 3 million crystals any day long. Then we have the auto help count. Now this, I don't know how useful this is going to be, because obviously this might be, if this is going to be used after the health cap, I can see some benefit if you're really fighting for that long, which is not unrealistic because the fights are going to take longer. I think this could be quite a good pickup, but I'm gonna see how that actually plays out in a KVK. But when it comes to other changes, I like the fact that they are reducing or condensing. Is that the right word? Like combining multiple researchers into one. So barbarian damage and crystal gain is very good for chaining, obviously. Damage and crystal production as well. So for Kokurak, there's only 4 Kokurak, so don't have to rely too many troops on it. I guess it's going to be a bit harder, but it's going to be more crystals if I remember correctly. So it kind of all evens it out, and I'm quite happy you don't have to like do even more prerequisites, because in the current tech you have some prerequisites that don't allow you to proceed if you don't, do your Kokurak production to a certain level, and then that is depending on the Kokurak damage, and you get the idea. Bastion favorite crystal increase, love it. I think it's quite good. I think it goes up to 15, so I think it's still going to be the same amount, but just less prerequisites to do so. Larger camps is only 1 research now, and it's a bit farther up in the tree. So I think this is also going to be a nerf to the farm meta. As you can see, larger camps is here. It's quite far. So if you want to use farms, you have to work a bit more to get there. How much more remains to be seen with the prerequisites. But overall, it's going to take you around 100 million crystals to reach max tech if you start your way from mine level 25 and the academy level 25. So most people are not going to do that. So you're probably going to be spending a bit more than 100 million, depending on how you start. as a lower spender. But as a free to play, I don't expect to be reaching more than 80 million tops. I would love to be wrong, but you just have to be in a KVK to see it. And I don't see too many cons to this tech tree, because I've seen some debates on how this is not actually good for free to play because we're not doing as much damage anymore. And if you don't fight in a ball like efficiently, you're going to be having less kills, which might be true, but we're all getting less kills. So it's not just free to play. So less kills means more, maybe possibly more resources spent. Maybe not. You know, if you have a higher troop count, you're going to be burning out more resource. So in the future, I'm not going to be surprised if you see more resource return per KVK, maybe going upwards to 30% from the current 15 if you don't have your art arc. I could definitely see that, and I think it would be a very good change if they did that, because it will allow you to go into KVK more frequently and not just wait before the interest dies down, or just queue up for a recovery KVK where you're not going to be fighting your 100% capacity. So overall, I definitely am excited for the new crystal tech. I know this is going to be a rambling video, but I'm just sharing my thoughts out loud. Maybe I've done some wrong information. Maybe I'm not perfect, but I just like the changes that we're slowing down, at least in some segment of the game, because we were going at a very high pace and we're just getting too fast and too fast in general. Because if you're fighting, you get out of position, you use more resources, you use more speed ups, and the fights are going generally not lasting that long. Like in KVKs, if you're fighting for like a week or 10 days total, that's going to be like an above average KVK. I think in most cases you're fighting less than a week overall, which is not good. You want to be fighting. We're playing the game to fight, to win, and having the chances to do that more frequently, and to have a bit more slower pace while doing it, I think is just a no-brainer. Now, obviously, there's going to be always some people who disagree, but I'm fairly positive about it. And I want to see more details. I want to see the prerequisites and see what happens. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about the new tech. And consider subscribing if you're new to the channel. Like the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.